He's been planning on that.
I've not seen him.
I've only gone to the City Hall. I think I have 25 years. We're paying you.
Is a manager. No, I
came up with one of those.
I know, it's been like a month of Sundays.
Just a shot. Easy brain dead pattern. I don't have to think too much. There's seats up front. Hi.
Hello? Oh, yes, Jerry. Yeah, I recognize you. TV. And that Patrick, you're selling your books now.
I don't have hard to find some
Oh,
like
no.
that.
Well, I'll come listen to you.
Okay.
We have my granddaughter had a granddaughter who was born in October, I believe. And then they had a baby shower for her. And they sent these things out, this out, for a baby shower.
Oh.
I got some squibbly eyes.
I'm sorry I didn't bring, my book is out of print, so I didn't have that with me. But
Yeah.
that's cool. You'll find something else for you. I'm sure you will.
And so I've been looking for books for her, even though she's not even a year old yet. But I'm glad to see that you teach her how to read.
Yeah.
Can't read.
Yeah. No, that's great. That is lovely.
Thank you very much. Try to behave myself.
I'll be I'll sit next to you.
Yes.
Lots of stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about the work that I do. So I'll talk about, telling Iowa stories, and I brought some excerpts from some interviews that I've done. And hopefully it'll be fun. Hopefully it'll be a little thought-provoking.
I watch Iowa and Green quite a bit.
Oh, that's
I
great.
like to do anything for myself.
Nice.
I used to work at the Gallery Library. 9.5 years I worked at the library. That's where I couldn't remember that. I couldn't in there. I couldn't remember the name.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like that.
Remember the year 2020. It seemed like there was a news story every hour or two. And I don't have cable or internet, but there's a little plastic radio in my living room that's normally set to ESPN Omaha. I turned the dial the smallest amount, and I picked up a satellite of Iowa Public Radio, and I learned that they've got world news on the hour, followed by regional news out of Des Moines. I got in the habit of listening to this first thing in the morning, after I get back from my walks, then late afternoon, and then before I go to bed. I must get back from the walks about 9:45 because I'd make a sandwich and carry it to the living room and flip on the radio. But at 10 o'clock, they don't go straight to world news. Rather, it was our guest today giving a 30-second promotion about her daily talk show on IPR. She was talking about the guests that they would have on, and typically it was an author. It was this time of year, early in the pandemic. It might be a horticulturist from Ames, entomologist, maybe somebody promoting a youth program in central Iowa. And I got in the habit of listening to this radio show, and I was taken by the host, of course pleasant and engaging, but two things jumped out to me early on. One was, if there was a repeat guest, someone who had been on her show before, they were very glad to see her. You could hear it in their voice. They liked her. They liked her very much. And the second time was, it's an hour show, and so I'm doing things around the house, the laundry and opening my mail and that. And once it was just a very entertaining conversation for about half an hour, intelligent conversation. But about 40 minutes into this interview, she made a comment that just stopped me. As a new listener, and I don't know how many other listeners that day were affected by that, but this was clearly somebody who had done her background on her guest, and this was a very sharp individual. It just seemed like a special thing. Well, I listened to her show for about a year and a half during the pandemic. And then after that, I went back to my off-grid ways. Until a year ago, January, I'm at Bridge Club one afternoon, and I said to my friend, Dr. Frank Richardson, right over here, I said, when we're done playing cards, can you come over? I'd like to visit. And he said, of course. I said, it's time to put year two together. I'm not sure who to invite. Do you have any suggestions? And he looked down and he thought about it. And he finally looks up and he says, what about Charity Nebbe? And I said, oh, good one. I know her from her radio. And Frank says, women love her. My sister and wife go on and on about her. I got gal relatives, they drive 100 miles just to see her and to meet her. To which I responded, women lover, I think I had a radio crush. Then, 2 months later, I'm at lunch with Deborah Marquardt, poet laureate. She was here last April. Professor in Ames. And over lunch I said, I saw on Wikipedia that you've been on Charity Nebbe's show twice. And she says, oh, John, I've been on more than that, probably 6 or 7 times. In fact, when she was an undergrad, she was in one of my classes' names. To which I replied, really? Well, do you think she'd be interested in coming to Lakeview? Would she consider that? Do you think you could introduce us a little bit? I just think she's great. Deborah looked down and shook her head. And finally she looked up and she said, she's wonderful. Good afternoon and welcome to the library. Thank you for your attendance, for everybody who organizes this, but I'm sure our guest is gonna, well, it will be nice to see that this audience too. Quick sketch, she's a native Iowan, Ogden and Cedar Falls. Her father was a businessman, her mother was a counselor at all levels, including Drake. And she has 2 older brothers. And I asked her where she got this interest in educational media. And she said growing up that the family as a unit would listen to National Public Radio. It was that kind of a household. She goes to Iowa State, knocks on the door of the university radio station, WOI, starts at the lowest level. She said her first job was all night long graveyard shift. On the hour, she had to push a button. But she moves up. On-air personality. Double major in political science and biology, and she does this in 3 years, by the way. There's no electives or anything when you do this. And I said, why that combination of what I would call sociology and science? And she said, when you're talking to authors and experts in a field, that if they were giving her a line, something that had no basis, that she'd be able to see that as an interviewer. Goes to Michigan Public Radio, she's in Ann Arbor, she's a local host for All Things Considered, an NPR show, and she developed her own children's show called Chinwag Theater that ran on like 75, I think, NPR stations, and she writes a children's book up there too. Then returns to Iowa in 2010 to become the popular host of the daily talk show on Iowa Public Radio, Talk of Iowa. She has since become the host of 2 television shows on Iowa Public Television. Iowa Ingredient is a cooking show. It's currently in reruns, but they've done about 60 episodes that you can see. And the other one just started last fall, and it's called Iowa Life. Lastly, please, a compliment by way of introduction. And it is that whenever her name has come up, I've always had a hard time putting my finger on why do I admire her as a host. And I would say to people things like her etiquette's impeccable, she meets people well, she doesn't say the wrong thing, she's funny, she says the nice thing nicely. It's been very clumsy. I could not find the word that best describes our guest. Until recently. I have found the perfect word to describe her. She's gracious. This is the most gracious person I've ever met. And I've learned from her that graciousness is for everyone. And you'll say I'm a fan, and that's fine. But I've wondered, I'm not alone, and I've wondered how many academicians and executives and board members have signed off on her, so that today she is the face and voice of Iowa Public Broadcasting, the best programming in Iowa. Please welcome to Lakeview, Ms. Charity Nebbe.
Thank you so much. And I noticed that my computer logged me out while he was talking, so it's not a very graceful way to start, but let's see if I can get back in here. There we go. Okay, well, it is such a delight to be here today. And just chatting with people before we started, Ree Irwin is here, and she's been on my show. Mrs. Lyman is here. Now, I've lost you. There she is, and she taught at my junior high school. Is there anyone else that I already know? The Moyers are here, and I saw them not long ago. So anybody else I'm supposed to know? Just raise your hand. We'll see. So I did grow up in Iowa, and I love Iowa. I've loved Iowa for as long as I can remember. And when I grew up, I kind of had a patriotic fervor about the state. You know, I was just so proud to be Iowan and be from Iowa. And the fervor really only heightened when I hit 5th grade and took Iowa history. Anybody else take 5th grade Iowa history? I just kept going after that, and I just gobbled up books about pioneers, and I imagined I was young Kate Shelley crawling across a bridge in a lightning storm. And when I was in junior high, I started volunteering at the Cedar Falls Historical Museum on weekend afternoons. It was not that popular or that busy, so between visitors, I would look through all the papers collected in the library. I'd go through the boxes up in the attic. Don't tell anybody, Mary. And I continued to really be excited about history. And when I was in 7th grade, I think it was 7th, at Pete Junior High, I portrayed Abby Gardner Sharp, who survived what was then called the Spirit Lake Massacre, for a History Day performance. And I'll get back to that later. But as I got older, my interests broadened. Politics, science, international relations, nature, and the environment were always interests and passions. I did go to Iowa State University. I did an internship at the State House. And most importantly, I got to be a part of telling Iowa stories on WOI radio. I did major in biology and political science, but I really majored in WOI. And I was there all the time, not even just between midnight and 5 a.m. pushing one button once an hour. After I graduated from college, I went to work in Indiana briefly, and then I came back to Iowa and worked full-time at WOI radio. And as a working journalist, I really learned a lot about how to tell stories and hear stories in a different way. And I'll help you understand what I mean by that in a little while. In 2000, my husband, who's back there in the corner, somebody else I know in the crowd, and I moved to Michigan, where I worked at Michigan Radio in Ann Arbor, and I loved Michigan, and I still love Michigan, but one of the great benefits of living elsewhere is that it really deepened my appreciation for the state of Iowa. I mean, yes, it was nostalgia and a little bit of homesickness, but having really intimate, deep knowledge of another state helped me understand Iowa better. It deepened my perspective. It helped me see with clearer eyes, both the positives and the negatives about Iowa. And then pretty much as soon as our oldest child was born, we started talking about moving back to Iowa, the pull of family, the quality of life, the schools. We moved back in 2010 when our daughter was 5 and our son was 3. And when we moved back to Iowa, I made myself some promises. Number one, I promised myself that I would never again take the Iowa sky for granted. I grew up with our amazing sky with those cloud formations. It's so big, it's so vast, it's so beautiful. And they do have a sky in Michigan, but it is not as nice. They have a lot of really nice things. Lakes are pretty good too. But so I promised myself that I would never take the sky for granted. I also promised myself that I would do my best to tell Iowa's stories, and not just the kinds of happy fairy tales that I believed when I was that 5th grader in school, but to tell true, nuanced stories about our state, to amplify the voices of Iowans, to listen, to really listen and learn about my fellow Iowans, and to build connection, to build community and empathy through sharing these stories. And that's what I do on Talk of Iowa every day. And to help you understand this a little bit better, I want to go back to that History Day performance. And I know we're up in the part of Lake, we're not too, or part of the state, we're not too far away from Spirit Lake, so probably a lot of us grew up hearing about Abby Gardner Sharp. And back in 1987, you know, I thought I did the deepest kind of research about the Spirit Lake Massacre. I spent a lot of time in the Pete Junior High Library with Mrs. Seeley. And I read every available source at the Cedar Falls Public Library. None of those sources told me much beyond the fact that we know about the Spirit Lake Massacre, the horror, the heartbreak, 34 settlers murdered, 4 women taken prisoner, 2 of them later killed. There was absolutely nothing about the other side of that story. And as young as I was, and naive as I was, and sheltered as I was, I never thought about the other side of that story. The side that's told this way in an article written by Katie Proud, and it was published on LitHub back in 2017. On March 8th, 1857, the sun was out when what was left of the AQPtotcPi3fGjUse Dakota, led by AQPtotcPi3fGjUse, returned to this land. The land they had been living on further back than memory could attest, land that AQPtotcPi3fGjUse had refused to sign away, even after a drunk white whiskey trader killed his children, killed his nephews, killed his wife, and put his brother's head on a pike, unintentionally making him a chief. AQPtotcPi3fGjUse, 60, an old man with the knowledge of decades and the power of a new ruler and a heart that was broken, they, what was left of the AQPtotcPi3fGjUse Dakota, returned to the land they love, only to find that in their time away, someone else had built upon it walls and a door. Does that mean that the Gardners, Abby's parents, were villains? No, I don't think that. They were a product of their time. They probably believed in manifest destiny. They probably believed that indigenous people were less than human. Most of the European settlers did. They might not even have known that the land was inhabited before they got the rights to build their homestead. But even if they did, they probably would have felt that it was their right, even their duty, to settle that land, to civilize it. I don't believe that to have an understanding of history, we need to vilify anybody in a story. That story seemed very black and white to me when I was in 7th grade. And when you learn more about it, it takes on the shades of reality, right? We don't have to have a villain in every story. I want us to understand the forces that shape our state and our country. I want to understand how 2 human beings can look at each other and not see that the other's life has value. Because it's unthinkable when you put it in those terms, but it happens every single day in so many ways. And I think that asking those questions and trying to understand different people's viewpoints is really key to understanding and connecting with each other. For the first 6 years of my life, I lived in Ogden, Iowa. You're on this side of the state, so you know, but it's 30 miles west of Ames. I live in Iowa City now, so I have to tell people that because they're like, Ogden? Okay. Anyway, in between kindergarten and 1st grade, we moved to the big city of Cedar Falls, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. And to return to a theme, my naivete as a child, something that most kids have the luxury of having, which I'm grateful for, I never questioned why Cedar Falls was almost entirely white, whereas Waterloo, which is part of the same metropolitan community, was truly diverse. I didn't know until I was an adult that I was growing up in one of the most segregated metro areas in the country, and it wasn't until many years later, after I moved back to Iowa and started hosting Talk of Iowa, that I first read the work of a woman named Nicole Hannah-Jones. Now, it turns out that Nicole Hannah-Jones and I have a whole lot of things in common. We're almost exactly the same age. We graduated from high school the same year. We grew up 10 miles apart from each other. She was in Waterloo, I was in Cedar Falls. Both of our dads are veterans of the Vietnam War. We both loved to read. We both loved history. We both grew up to be journalists. Now she is a much more accomplished and famous journalist than I am, but still, we have a whole lot of things in common. And then there are also some significant differences. Nicole Hannah-Jones is black, I'm white, I went to great, well-funded schools, and my classmates were about 98% white. Hannah Jones didn't go to her neighborhood school. She was bused to a school across town in an effort to integrate the schools. And in my safe, happy bubble, I honestly, and it sounds ridiculous to say it now, I honestly believed that racism was mostly historical. Hadn't that all been pretty much settled during the Civil Rights Movement? Hannah Jones knew a lot better because she had a lived experience. She also had the education that she got from her loved ones. She also had white family members who were willing to love her but didn't want anything to do with her black father. When she was in high school, one of her teachers, a truly remarkable man named Ray Dial, handed her a book. And it was called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. And in that book, she learned about the White Lion, a ship that brought the first enslaved Africans to North America. It landed in Virginia in 1619. She never forgot reading that book, and later on when she was working for the New York Times, she created the 1619 Project, which won the Pulitzer Prize. And I spoke with her when the book version of the 1619 Project was published, and I'm going to play a little clip of that. That's a picture of her on stage at her alma mater, Waterloo West High School, sitting with Ray Dial, and also being interviewed by the amazing poet AQPtotcPi3fGjUse.
The decision 400 years ago to purchase enslaved Africans would shape so much about the country that would come. It would be a factor in the American Revolution. It would be a factor, in how our country nearly dissolved during the Civil War. Some of our worst societal tensions that we see now go back to that moment. So I really wanted to bring that date kind of out of the obscurity of history. And then I wanted to, through a series of essays, show how that legacy of a foundational American institution continues to shape the society that we live in very many ways, even though we don't often realize it. So there's essays on capitalism and American capitalism roots in slavery, on traffic patterns and how that goes back to the anti-Blackness that develops out of slavery. Everything from, why Americans consume so much sugar to democracy itself. And it was just a way for us to understand that an institution that was practiced in this country for 250 years still shapes so much about our society, even though we don't know it.
So I love learning about history, and I have done a lot over the years before the 1619 Project to fill in the gaps in my historical knowledge. And there's been just so much incredible stuff published in our lifetimes. But reading the 1619 Project was really a big moment for me because it made me feel like my entire life I had been looking at the United States, and it was like a jigsaw puzzle with a bunch of pieces gone and things jammed into each other, pieces that don't match up, smudged together. And the 1619 Project gave me those missing pieces, or at least a lot of them. And it really helped me to understand our country in a much more powerful way. And, I've dedicated my adult life to working in public radio, but part of that dedication is really to lifelong learning. And it's hard for me to understand why people are threatened by new information. My life feels richer because I keep learning about our history, about who we are. I keep learning about other people whose experiences are different from mine. And there are things, of course, in our history that make me profoundly sad, but I still feel richer knowing. I don't want to pretend that bad things have never happened or that my ancestors never made mistakes. I love to learn. I have so much more to learn, and we all do, and we can learn every day. One of the things I also want to say is that I love this about Iowa. We're a small state, we have a small population. If you pass through Iowa and you've done something interesting, we'll be like, well, they stopped at the rest stop by Grinnell. And so they're kind of Iowan. Johnny Carson only lived here till he was 8 years old. and we love to claim him as one of our native sons, right? So I was also struck by the fact that Nicole Hannah-Jones won a Pulitzer Prize. And not only did we not celebrate her as a state, but our state legislature tried to ban her work by name. And then they decided not to include specifically the 1619 Project in their legislation, but it effectively has kept this best-selling, Pulitzer Prize-winning, brilliantly crafted, award-winning work out of our schools. And I am a journalist. I don't know how much people understand about what that means anymore. I don't even know if I know what it means anymore. Public radio is not advocacy journalism. I do not talk about my political views in a public forum because that's not my job. My job is to share information. We are fact-driven, fact-based journalism, and my personal views are not part of that. And we don't tell people how to think or what to do. We give you the information that you need to decide what you think about something. And trust me, we get nasty emails from people on both sides of the political divide. And that is a little bit heartening because I think, okay, we're walking the line. We're making people mad on both sides. But I said that because I don't believe that I am sharing my political views when I say this. I grew up believing that we had this sort of shared foundation in this country, that we believed in our Constitution, that we believed in our democracy. And so then I became a journalist, and the First Amendment, of course, is a huge part of my life. But I think it's a huge part of all of our lives. And I'll just read it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right to the people, peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And I believe in those 5 freedoms, and I know a lot of other Iowans do too. And there has been a powerful movement in this state to ban books and ban ideas. And I don't think I'm violating my role as a journalist when I say that I think that's wrong. That's un-American. And while I'm on the subject of books and standing in this beautiful institution, I want to talk about libraries too. I love libraries so much, and they have been so instrumental in my life. Some of my earliest memories were at the Leonard A. Good Public Library in Ogden, Iowa. There it is. And there were 2 women there, 2 women librarians. Jean Phipps was the director of the library and the head librarian. And then Patty Lincoln was also a librarian there. And we moved away when I was 6 years old, but I had spent so much time at the library that I became very close to both of those women. I remained lifelong friends with them. We had family in Ogden, so we would go back frequently. And I was friends with both of them until they died. So on the left, that's little Charity, and I'm holding a doll that I inherited from my mother, but apparently she didn't give it a name when she gave it to me, so I named that doll Jean Phipps. And I never just called her Jean, I always said Jean Phipps. And then on the other side is Jean Phipps, real Jean Phipps, holding my son when he was a baby. She lived to be 90 and got to meet both of my children. So that was an incredibly important part of my childhood, that library, but then I moved to Cedar Falls, and my next library was at Southdale Elementary in Cedar Falls, and I was a voracious independent reader. And so by the end of 3rd grade, I had read everything in the school library that I cared to read. So after that, I started spending a lot more time at the Cedar Falls Public Library. And the Cedar Falls Public Library Children's Collection kept me busy for a while, but then I ran into a problem when I was 11 years old. I had finished reading everything that interested me in the children's section of the library, and this was in 1986. I was in 5th grade. I needed more books, but there was a hard, fast rule that you could not access the adult section of the library until you were 12 years old. And YA literature like wasn't a thing back then. We live in the golden age of young adult literature. There's so much good stuff. It's not, it was not there then. And I begged and pleaded to be allowed on the other side of the library. My dad spoke to the librarians and said that I had his permission, but they did not allow me to. They, honestly, it was a difficult time in my life. They treated me like I was a rule breaker. They watched me like hawks. I was not allowed to walk across the center of the library. And I know it's funny, but to me it was really a serious thing. Because not only was I a voracious reader, and I was so hungry for books back then, but I was also going through a really hard time in my life. I know, 5th graders, what kind of problems can we have, right? But I was very badly bullied and ostracized. I had no friends in my school. And so books were my escape. They were also my armor. Because when you're a kid who nobody wants to spend time with at recess and you're holding a book, at least you look like you're doing something. So I have thought a lot about that time in a lot of different ways. There were a number of adults who kind of failed me in that time. Teachers, a guidance counselor, but that was the 1980s. Bullying wasn't really considered a problem unless there was bloodshed, and there wasn't. It was a lot of hurt, but not a lot of bloodshed. And in fact, I've learned a lot more about what happened to me as an adult. I've done interviews about it as well. The term for it is relational aggression. That term wasn't even coined until after I graduated from high school, but it's a type of aggression in which harm is caused by damaging someone's relationships or social status. So anyway, it was a tough time. I'm okay now. My dad helped me get through the year by checking out books that he thought I would like from the adult section of the library. There were some hits and there were some misses, but you know, books then and now were as essential to me as food and water. And living those thousands of lives have shaped me. They have allowed me to deepen my empathy. They have taken me around the world. They've allowed me to live vicariously, to learn about history, and so many other things. And I want to share this quote. This is by a woman named Rudine Sims Bishop. And I just think she sums up the power of books so beautifully, especially for children. Books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of a larger human experience. Reading, then, becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. And as a straight white girl growing up, I saw myself reflected all over the place in books. I never thought about what that representation, that affirmation meant to me, because it was everywhere. I could take it for granted.
No.
Diversifying my reading later has given me so many more windows to look through. And I feel it's made me a better and a richer person. It's also definitely made me a better radio host. And over the years, I've had a lot of conversations with guests about representation in media and what it has meant to them. I was interviewing a man he's a professor of media studies. He's no longer in Iowa. He is a gay black man, and I asked him when he first saw himself, his identity reflected in media, any kind of media when he was growing up. And he stopped, and he thought, and he said, I don't think I ever did. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a group of student journalists at an Iowa City high school, and they wanted to know who I had interviewed who was famous. And so I was racking my brain to think, who's famous to 16-year-olds who I've talked to? And one of the names that I dropped was a man named Rick Riordan. And he is the author of the Percy Jackson series. I don't know if that rings many bells, a few bells. Anyway, after class, this young man came up to me very shyly, and he told me that Rick Riordan had saved his life. And he offered to share a poem he had written about it. Jack Alden is the name of this young man, and back 2 years ago, he was a senior at West High School in Iowa City, but I invited Jack to do an interview with me, and he read his poem on the air, and I'd like to share that with you. That's Rick Riordan, by the way.
That's my phone.
Oops, that's not gonna work. Let's see.
Trigger warning for talk of suicide. When I was 11, I realized I wasn't straight. I thought I deserved to die, and I nearly killed myself, but there were 2 reasons that I didn't. Number 1, I was and still am terrified of dying, but it postponed me killing myself at best. I kept thinking, I'll wait for a sign from God telling me I'm wrong. I desperately hope for one to say that you are not evil, and I don't think I exactly got one. Number 2, in 6th grade, I was reading the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. I was on the House of Hades book, chapter 36, page 292, the 10th line. I had a crush on Percy, Nico spat. Not all heroes wear capes, but many have pens. Reading that made the difference between a paper cut and a knife cut, between turning my lights out and keeping them on to reread, reanalyze, and commit to memory those lines. That line kept the headline as whatever it was supposed to be, not 11-year-old kills herself. It kept me alive long enough to know it should be himself, not herself. It made the difference between a body bag and me grabbing my school bag and putting the book in to always have it near. It made the difference between me and a grave and me standing here. I am alive due to a book. The book talks about God, but isn't a religious text. Religion was why I was in need of saving in the first place. The difference between reading a story and a news story, of staying up late reading and never getting up, a few chapters versus the end of my life, a few pages saved my life, that one line prevented a headline, and that is why representation matters. That is why you should want diversity. I am alive due to a few words that changed my story. It did not affect yours, I promise. Representation is why I'm alive.
It's just a few words in a book, but it made all the difference for Jack's life. And I do think Judy Blume has some pretty wise words on this one. Let children read whatever they want and then talk about it with them. If parents and kids can talk together, we won't have as much censorship because we won't have as much fear. I'm also going to take this opportunity to plug my book club. Segue. So I have a Talk of Iowa book club, and we read 6 books a year. Our next book is coming up on April 15th. It's a book called The Ex-Vangelicals by Sarah McCammon, who used to be our morning edition host at Iowa Public Radio several years ago, and she's now a reporter for NPR. She grew up in an evangelical community in Kansas City, Missouri, and eventually did leave that community. And she has written this beautiful book that is a combination of reporting and memoir. And it's a really, really fascinating look, both at the journey that she has been on and that other people who left the evangelical church have been on, but also a look, if you haven't grown up or haven't been part of an evangelical community, a look into that community, which of course is part of a powerful political movement that has really reshaped our nation. So it's a fascinating book, so much to learn from it. We will be talking about it on the air on April 15th. And we also have a Facebook group. If you search for IPR's Talk by Iowa Book Club, you can join us. We would love to have you. So I talked a lot about radio. Radio is my first love. But I did sort of accidentally start working in television at one point, and I did that in Michigan. It was sort of forced, but it turned out to be a wonderful thing. And when I moved back to Iowa in 2010 to work at Iowa Public Radio, I also got in touch with Iowa PBS, and I said, hey, are there any opportunities? And I did a little bit of hosting for them, and then I met Deb Herbold. And Deb Herbold was starting a new show at the time called Iowa Ingredient. And if you haven't seen the show, which I know some people probably haven't, but so she wanted to dive into the local foods movement and use it as an opportunity to profile people growing food in Iowa and profile chefs and then bring it all together so we can cook with these Iowa ingredients. And it was so much fun to work on that series, and it's fun to watch too because it's such a love letter to Iowa. We're so overlooked. We are so underrated. We're such a beautiful state, and even just the incredible photography that really shows how beautiful this state is such a lovely part of that. So that show, even though it's still on every Thursday and Saturday, was canceled in 2021. And I think eventually people will stop recognizing me in the grocery store because I'm not even going to look like the woman on the show that he's running. But it was just a really wonderful experience to be a part of it. And when Deb hired me for that job, she said that I had this great girl next door quality that she really loved, which I definitely took as a compliment. But I'm a little bit of a weirdo. And so I thought, girl next door, okay. But you know what? Here we are in a small town. I grew up, for 6 years of my life in a small town. And even though a lot of our small towns may not look very diverse, we have a lot of hidden diversity. When you think about your quirky neighbor or the friend with very different beliefs from your own, the people that you get to interact with. Maybe think about people in small towns who have big ideas and are great at organizing things, like John Quinn. You can think about people who help others. I've pulled just some sound from some of the interviews of some extraordinary small town folks that I've interviewed over the years. Maggie Reyes is one. She lives in Storm Lake, and she is an outreach specialist for Buena Vista County, Upper Des Moines Opportunity Incorporated. Has anybody here met Maggie Reyes? You should. Oh, she is. Oh, yay. Well, anyway, she's the warmest, loveliest woman. She kept calling me beauty throughout the interview. It was just so sweet. But we have a clip of her talking about a program she started to assist seniors.
Oh my God. It's because, I love my seniors. And every time when they come, most of them are alone. They have so many health problems. They receive Social Security or disability, but also they have to pay their rent, their bills, their medical bills, their medicine, and they don't have enough money left for food. So that's why when they come, I have my special day for them. It's on Mondays by appointment, because I don't want them to be waiting a long time outside. They come and we help them. They have their choice. They can pick whatever they need. And also, like for Adopt a Family for Christmas, I include them because they don't have anybody. And I don't like them to feel alone. I want them to feel that they have another people, that they care for them. We love them. We respect them.
Maggie obviously brings people together in her community. There are also people who create destinations and community, people like Byron Stewart at Byron's Bar in Pomeroy, and all of the people who rallied around him when he was in danger of losing that venue. And of course he did lose the physical venue, but he's back, right? So I asked him to tell me how he's gotten all these big national acts, because he gets amazing musicians to come to Pomeroy. John, you think it was hard to get me to come to Lakeview. And the rumor is that he gets these big acts because he treats them better than they are treated at other venues. And so I asked him to tell me how he treats those acts.
I don't know what other people do. I just know that when they come in there, I give them a big hug, ask them what they need, show them where they're going to set up, and just let them go for it. And then I've cultivated an audience that actually comes to listen to the music. Because I will shush you if you're talking.
And Byron will shush you.
Yes.
Has he ever shushed you, Reed?
No.
No, he's never had to. Have you been shushed?
No, but she shushes.
Oh! So I know you had Art Cullen here, and of course, you know, come hell or high water, the Cullens were going to keep that paper going. And they have kept that paper going. Another Pulitzer Prize winner that he may not be very popular in Des Moines, but they didn't try to ban him. So we've also got people like some folks in Denison, Iowa, who started their own newspaper because Lee Enterprises turned their paper into a shell with almost no local content being created. So Lorena Lopez, Dan Munt, and Gordon Wolf got together and started the Denison Free Press. And of course they did that with support from the Western Iowa Journalism Foundation, which is another one of those homegrown organizations that is working so hard to keep rural Iowa strong. And ever since the 1980s, ever since the farm crisis, we have seen in particular small towns in Iowa really struggling for so many reasons. But then we see some communities with full occupancy on Main Street, communities that are strong and communities that are thriving. And, Iowa State University has done a lot of research to try to figure out why some of these small towns thrive and others don't. And one of the big differences is the individuals who live there, people who are willing to invest in their community. And they came up with a term for those people. They call them champions. And it's a beautiful story, though, because it also reminds us that we do have individual power to invest in our communities, to connect with other people, whether or not we think alike. We live together. We all have a vested interest in keeping our state strong and keeping our communities strong. Libraries also make our community strong. Local journalism makes our community strong, and it is disappearing. And if you listen to Art Cullen, he probably talked about that. But over the last 20 years, local newsrooms have been hemorrhaging jobs. A lot of local papers have maybe 1 or 2 employees, or they just don't exist at all. And when we lose our local news, we lose so much. We lose our connection with each other. We lose those pictures of our kids in the paper when they do something good. We lose the obituary section when we lose people. We lose oversight of our local government. We lose insight in our elections and voting. We become more vulnerable to fake news and to scams. And it does weaken. It weakens our democracy. It weakens our community. It tests our bonds. And I just want to say that it's so important if you have local news, and I think Lakeview does pretty well in that category. You've got to support it. You've got to support it or it will go away, because it's going away. Oh. Are you the how many people at your paper?
There's 2 of us in that office.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. I'm sure 2 people in an office, I'm sure you're pretty busy. And before I wrap up, I do want to talk about something else that is good for your state. It's public broadcasting. It's something that I believe in really strongly. And as I mentioned before, we're not advocacy journalists. We're fact-based journalists. And we are doing our best to let you know what's going on. We cover state government in Iowa on Iowa Public Radio exhaustively. I could 100% exhaustively if you ask our State House journalists about it. And I know lately you've probably heard quite a bit about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And so I just want to let you know what it is and how it works. So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is a private corporation. It was created by Congress through the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967, and its mission is to provide every American with free over-the-air access to stations that inform, educate, enlighten, and enrich the public, and to help inform civil discourse essential to American society. And public media stations are not solely supported by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but they do receive grants to support that mission. And public radio has been part of Iowa for more than 100 years. And we are available to anyone in Iowa who has a radio, although some of those far-flung places need an AM radio, and I know young people don't know what AM radio is anymore, so that's a little bit more challenging. But we do have an app for your smartphone. We are there. If you have a smart speaker, you can ask it to play Iowa Public Radio through TuneIn, and we are there. We have digital newsletters that are all free. We are available on your computer if you go to IPR.org. We are there for you. There is no paywall. We are doing our best to support you. And public television is also essential to Iowa. It's been part of the state for more than 50 years, and it's available to every household with a TV. And it's also on, IowaPBS.org. They publish everything that they create locally on YouTube. You can stream it through the PBS app, and you can also now stream it through Amazon.com. So it's available to people. It's there for you. Iowa Public Radio and Iowa PBS have very different budgets. Iowa Public Radio receives no state funding. We are entirely independent. We purchased our licenses from the state a couple of years ago. So we are an entirely independent community licensee that is also a statewide network. And we get about 10% of our budget from the CPB. That's about $800,000. And if and when it goes away, it's going to hurt. You will hear it, but we will not go away. We will still be there. Public television is a more complicated story. They get about 47% of their budget from the state of Iowa. And I couldn't find, because I freelance for them, I'm not on the inside. So I couldn't find exactly how much they get from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But it will be more challenging for Iowa PBS. I think that's clear to say. John mentioned that, we mentioned Iowa Ingredient, and I will wrap up here, I promise, but I did start hosting a show called Iowa Life just this past year. Tuesday evenings at 6:30, Sunday mornings at 10:30. And it's been so much fun to get to be a part of that show. It's actually kind of like the television version of Talk of Iowa, in that, we get to tell Iowa stories. We travel around the state. Just last week, we aired a piece that we did at the Color of the Wind Festival in Clear Lake, which was really cool. Larry Day is another one of those local champions. He was a high school math teacher who just got into kites and then decided to start this giant local festival that brings so many people to the community. He's just a really cool guy. So it's really fun to be a part of that. And, we've done, we profiled a young man restoring his family's land with a herd of bison. We learned about an organization that trains service dogs that help the deaf. We profiled the M Shop. Any Cyclones here? The M Shop at Iowa State University, which is a great music venue. We rode along with Iscaro Mutza Quetzali, which is an incredible horse performance group with historic ties to Mexico. It's a lot of cool stuff. Tuesday evenings at 6:30. And I did put some IPR and Iowa Life stickers out on the table next to the cookies. So feel free. I do a lot of things, but if you have to look for a through line in my work, it's curiosity and connection. And I'm so grateful to all the people who have connected with me, who also share my curiosity, who listen, who watch what I do. If you are among that crowd, thank you so much for making all of that work worthwhile. And it has been just a joy to talk to all of you today, so thank you so much. And we can do some questions if anybody's got questions. Yes?
Sure, you have so many interesting guests on your program, you know, from so many backgrounds. There have to be some interesting people behind the scenes arranging that. Could you kind of share those people that make your program along with you possible?
Absolutely. What a great question, and my producers will be so excited. So in the radio world, we have 2 local talk shows. We have Talk of Iowa at 10 a.m. and we have River to River on the air at noon. And we have 3 full-time producers. And so right now it's 3 young women who are just bright and enthusiastic and engaged, and they work their butts off to make all of these connections. And we have a meeting every day at 2 o'clock, and we brainstorm ideas for the show. I will say that on Talk of Iowa, I have never had a lack of ideas, so I bring a lot of the ideas to the table, but then we brainstorm how to build them out, you know, who to bring into the conversations. And then they have to do all the really hard work, which is making all of those phone calls and getting people lined up to be on the show. And then they also pre-interview every guest that I interview. So they talk to somebody before I talk to them and gather kind of the most interesting nuggets and put them into notes that I get to read. And then I get to study for the show, and then it happens at 10 o'clock. TV is somewhat similar, although, again, I'm not as involved. Like, I come in kind of later after they tell me what's going on and what to do. I don't get to be the creative engine that drives the television work. I'm much more of a cog in that machine, although I really enjoy that. But, you know, it's getting to do what I do is such a privilege, and getting to make radio with these brilliant young people is so exciting and fun. Sometimes it's exhausting and we have bad days, but most of the time we have a really good time, and it's a lot of fun. Yes?
I love how you are on both sides, like your child's book that I was able to read.
Yeah.
About the walk with your dog, and that you showed both sides of how the dog feels, how you feel with the dog. It's almost like how you are, you know? You see both sides of everything, and I love that.
Oh, thank you.
I really do.
Thank
That
you
book,
so
I was
much.
trying to find my own copy, and I couldn't find my own copy, but
Yeah,
that book is great.
Oh,
that was a
thank
great
you.
book.
Thank you very much. It is out of print, so I'm sorry. There's a small stack of them up high in a cupboard at my house that I'm saving for grandchildren. Though I have thought about maybe trying to make it come out again, so we'll see. But thank you. I do sometimes wonder whether what I do has shaped me, or if I just found my niche in the world, because I was a kid who asked questions constantly. My mom told me that when I was 3 years old, she thought about hiring somebody just to answer questions. We certainly didn't have the money to do that, but she was good at answering questions and a patient listener. But yeah, so I don't know. But thank you. That really means a lot to me. Yes?
Well, I just have to put a plug in for the Sac-Sun newspaper, in that I will tell you, a lot of the times the crossword puzzle that is put in that paper is much harder than the New York Times. I have to use my phone a lot.
Wait, isn't that cheating?
Yeah, it is. I can't finish it otherwise. One, it's not electronic, so it doesn't tell you if you put in the wrong letter. So, and it comes out twice. It comes out in the Sac-Sun and in the Reminder, which means that Frank gets it in the Sac-Sun and I get it in the Reminder, so we don't have to share the puzzle or copy it. And then we always compete who can finish more of it than me.
Nice. I love that. I love that.
It's a great paper.
That's fantastic.
Charity.
Yes.
Did you say something about your mentors or role models when you first started? Also, I remember hearing Don Forson used to come on, and then Doug Brown. And you and Don had this one little feature, I think it was on Fridays, where it had the...
Coffee with the classics?
Well, the fanfare to Masterpiece
Yeah,
Theater.
yeah, that was it.
Oh, that's amazing. And also, you remember doing the your version of the Eartha Kitt Christmas song?
I do. So I got to WOI radio at the perfect time. It was really kind of the end of a golden era at WOI. And so Doug Brown was the news director. Does anybody else here remember listening to Doug Brown on the radio? Okay. So you guys know how extraordinary Doug was. But Doug hosted a show called The Book Shop, or the Book Club for over 50 years. And he would read books on the air and just bring them to life in the most amazing way. He also hosted The Music Shop, which was classical music. And he also hosted wrestling on Iowa television. He was a Renaissance man. And so I got there really in just the last few years of Doug's career and was fortunate enough to get to learn from him. He had an amazing ability to connect with people. And one of the things that I love about public radio, it's a very intimate and authentic medium. When I'm on the air, I'm talking just to you. You know, we are one-on-one, the two of us together. And as a listener, that really moved me, and that's what got me hooked on public radio. And people like Doug Brown were just the master of having that intimate personal conversation. So Doug was one of my main mentors. And then Don Forsling, who, when I got there, he'd been everything. He'd been the general manager, he'd been the news director. But when I got there, he was the host of the morning report on their FM station. And then he was also hosting Talk of Iowa at 10 a.m. And Don used to like to say that he liked his coffee as dark as his soul. So Don was a cynic. Don was a man with a very dark sense of humor. He was also a man who most of the student employees at WOI were terrified of. And I started running the board for him in the mornings, and I started making him laugh. And Don and I got to be very good friends, and he gave me some extraordinary opportunities to make radio with him. So that's a lot of what you're remembering.
Do you have any of those? Are they still on tape? I thought maybe during fundraising drives you could replay some of them.
Well, I've got, if you give me your email address, I'll send you a link, okay? But also Karen Bryan was at WOI Radio, and she did classical music. She also hosted a show called Stage and Screen on Saturdays that when I started there, I thought it was a nationally syndicated show because it was just brilliant. And then I realized she was making it just for Iowa audiences. And then I watched her make it, and most of it was just ad-libbed because she was so brilliant and so knowledgeable. So she was another person that I learned a great deal from. But yes, I got there at just the right time to have some really extraordinary mentors. Also, when I started, the board operator who trained me was very good, and he's sitting right behind you. He didn't say in radio. Yes.
Dr. Quinn alluded to what I'm going to ask in his introduction. And just a quick aside, you gave me a term I've not heard before about small towns. I think Dr. Quinn is one of Lakeview's champions. My thought was, when I heard you do interviews, I think they're brilliant, but it sounds like you like those people and they like you. Do you just once in a while ad-lib or improvise as you're going along? Or
all the time. So, I study for my show, and then I write an introduction, and I make a list of the topics that I want to talk about in the interview. I call it my roadmap. So, I know where I want to start, and I know where I want to end, and here are some stops along the way. But I don't write my questions. So those are coming from me in that moment. And part of the reason that I don't, I've been doing it a long time, so I can trust my brain, I know, but part of the reason I don't write questions is because I firmly believe that the most important thing that an interviewer can do is listen. And so I work very hard, and believe it or not, it is a little bit of a challenge because I've got a lot of things coming at me, just to be in that moment, engaged with that person. And so that, I'm glad you can hear that connection, because that's what I'm trying really hard to do. And great radio is like great jazz. You don't know exactly what's gonna happen, you know? So all the best moments are serendipity, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. This is totally different. One of the shows I remember the best about Iowa Ingredient is cooking the holiday meal with your husband and children. Are you willing to share what your children are doing now?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And it's so funny because, like in these reruns, you know, Carter had to stand on an apple box to be able to see and be seen by the camera. He is 6'4" now. So, it's always wild to catch one of those and look back. My daughter is a sophomore at Iowa State University, and she is thriving and absolutely loving it. She is double majoring in psychology and climate science. And next year she's going to study abroad and spend the whole year in Lancaster, England. She's in honors and an honor leader, and she's fantastic. And our son Carter is a junior at Iowa City West, and he is obsessed with plants and cats. We think that's beautiful and wonderful. And he's very funny. He's always been very funny since the very start.
The first time I ever heard you on the radio, the first impression I had of you was, her voice is smiling.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. Well, I do quite a bit of voice coaching for people. And I do have to tell people, because people sit down and behind a microphone and they kind of freeze up. I said, you have to use your body and your face, because your facial expressions are audible. And I tend to be a smiley person. I think when John said gracious, I thought maybe he was going to say relentlessly cheerful. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a story behind how parents gave you your name?
It's just 1 Corinthians 13. If I have not charity, I have nothing. So, and people, I think, because 1 Corinthians 13 is faith, hope, and love now. I'm just kind of out of date.
Any other questions for Charity?
Well,
I'd like to make a short comment about small town newspapers.
Okay.
I have some very good friends who own a Dayton Leader over in Dayton, and she's an author. She wrote a couple of books, mostly about psychology and things along that line. But they are small town newspapers are struggling.
Yes.
Very much so. But there's always starts off with 10 pages, full-size newspaper too, not a little smaller, full-size, 10 pages she has in there. And she has a librarian from Dayton also who is a contributor, and I believe she's, no, I was going to say she's associate publisher or whatever it is, but anyway, but she's associated with the newspaper one way or another. But the librarian from Dayton is very much involved in the newspaper also, and the two of them do a wonderful job. Those two women do really great.
That's great.
And small town newspapers, I admire small town newspapers.
Amen.
Yeah.
Me too. Me too. And please subscribe. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. That's just
Been a terrific guest, and all of our guests in the speaker series get 3 gifts.
Ah.
And the first is, our town of Lakeview has a winery called Rustic River. It's run by the Phillips. It's not far from here. And when you and Rob come back, we'll get a group together and we'll go out there. It's a very nice setting. It's an old barn that's not overdone, and just the outdoors. We'll go out there the next time.
Okay. Okay.
Rustic River, and that's a dry
Thank
red,
you.
rock bottom red.
Thank you.
And secondly, my friend Angie Bennett, her name's come up several times with us, and she's very talented. She's an Iowa photographer, and she's a graphic artist. She helps with this series. She'll help you with your stationery. She's done so many things for the town, I should say. But she made several of these books a couple of years ago, and it's on Lakeview, and these are photos of some of the historical things and summer celebrations.
Oh, lovely.
So she couldn't be here today. I wanted the Moyers to meet Angie too.
You guys have to come back.
Wildlife photography.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, and lastly, I hope Mike Eckerman's not here because I went to Paxton's and I found the bracelet.
Oh.
And it's sterling. It's got 3 charms on it, and only the first one needs to be explained. The other 2 will be quick. But the first one is a dog bone.
Oh,
now,
lovely.
what do you think the dog bone means?
Well, I already told you I have 3 dogs, so.
She told me 3 or 4 times that she
Weird that they came up, I don't know.
I tried to praise you for being articulate. I'm in the nice position where I get to get acquainted with these speakers, and we met about a month ago over there, and someone over here asked about it was a big deal for me. She showed me Iowa Public Radio, downtown Iowa City, and I met all these young producers. John Green was interviewed that day, and I saw her do an interview.
I know.
I was back in the control room.
He wasn't in the building. It was, yeah.
I was back in the control room. She showed me all the equipment and met the young producers. But then also there's a famous bookstore over in Iowa City, and I hadn't been there since the 1990s. And she introduced me to the owner, a man that Diane works with here. We've got an agreement with Prairie Lights now. And the events coordinator, and we had a nice chat over coffee. But she mentioned that, anything you want to say about your dog?
I got a lot to say about my dog. I don't need to start. Do we have another hour?
Well, there's 3 charms. Let's let the dog bone be. That was a big day for me. And then there's an anchor for when you and Rob came to Lakeview today.
Nice.
And the last plaque has your name on one side, and the other side says LVSS, and that's for Lakeview Speaker Series and today's date.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for doing this. To announce who the speakers will be next month, and that's pretty much our show.
There's stickers out by the cookies. I don't want to take them home with me. Oh, that's beautiful. I know. We could ask her.
I'm sorry.
Her husband's coming over.
I know.
That's so great. It's very nice. They're begging for money.
So how's Bill Riley?
Oh, he's wonderful. He's such a fun guy. He did have a stroke last year, that's why he wasn't on state fair coverage.
Yeah, I missed him.
Right, I missed him too. I think he is planning to be back. Yeah, I hope so. I'll ask him. The last time he was doing it. So I really good. Did you want me to post for
I'll get this right here. You got things to do.
That's right, well, I hope so.
When I get a scorpion, I'm in trouble.
Some people have a bigger size. Don't answer.
Or you are friends, or neighbors.
I love that.
I'm not business to you.
Yeah, that's correct.
Where do you live?
So, out there, they can listen to AM640, you can do that on a smart thing. That's easy, that's good. It's a web app. Because they're called that refrigerator.